So imagine you walk into a kitchen supply store, right? And you're just scanning the aisles for like a decent coffee maker.
Just a standard, boring coffee maker.
Exactly. But suddenly you see this product that just absolutely baffles you. It's sitting there on an end cap, and it's this neon green, rhinestone-studded blender.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Good.
And you look at it, and immediately you just assess it as this complete failure of engineering and taste.
Like, who would buy that?
Exactly. You're thinking, the design is garish, the rhinestones are totally going to fall off in the dishwasher, and the color is literally physically hurting your eyes. So you judge it inherently right there as an empirically bad product.
Yeah, and I mean, it feels like an objective truth in that moment, right? Because the human brain is just incredibly efficient at processing information through the lens of our own preferences.
Right.
So we look at the blender, we measure it against our personal baseline of, what a kitchen appliance should look like, and it just fails that test completely.
It totally fails. But then, and this is the catch, someone taps you on the shoulder and they point out that, you live in this brutalist, minimalist apartment and you only drink black coffee.
Right. Your whole vibe is very different.
Completely different. That blender was never designed to sit on your matte black concrete counters.
No, definitely not.
It was designed for someone who loved, maximalist, eclectic decor and hosts these vibrant, chaotic margarita parties every single Friday night.
Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense for them.
Right. And suddenly, that entire framework you used to judge that object just collapses.
Right.
You realize it's not a badly designed product. You aren't the intended audience.
You're just not the target demographic.
Exactly.
Okay.
And today, we are actually watching this exact realization completely shatter the worldview of a prominent literary critic online.
Which is just fascinating to watch play out.
It really is. It's playing out in real time in front of hundreds of thousands of people. So for you listening today, we are plunging head first into the wildly confessional, fiercely guarded, and occasionally very toxic ecosystem of BookTube and AuthorTube.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, these are these highly specific corners of the internet where traditional literature just directly collides with modern influencer culture.
It's wild.
It really is. And the sources we have for this deep dive are amazing. We're analyzing this remarkably candid window into this world through a creator who runs a channel called Samian Books.
Yes, Samian Books.
And these video transcripts we're looking at, they're unedited stream of consciousness explorations. I mean, they're so raw.
They're almost chaotic, honestly.
Totally. There's this one particularly memorable moment where his recording is just entirely derailed because his cat...
No, this is the best part.
Right. His cat, appropriately named the Mad Queen, just breaks into the room and starts aggressively shredding the tissues on his desk.
Just absolutely going to town on these tissues.
While he is trying to deliver this deeply serious monologue about, artistic integrity.
Yeah, half his budget of tissues is just being destroyed on camera while he's talking about the soul of literature. It is delightfully chaotic.
It's so perfect.
But it's also the perfect backdrop, right?
Yeah,
because the issues he's unpacking are equally messy. We're tearing apart some really profound questions today. Like, how do we judge art that was fundamentally built for someone else?
Right.
And what happens to the actual mechanics of storytelling when books are treated as just mere merchandise by these mega?
That's a huge piece of this.
And finally, we are dissecting this dangerous psychological trap of giving advice before you've actually mastered the craft yourself.
Which is rampant online.
Oh, everywhere. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, let's dive in. Because the creator of this channel, Sammy, he begins his exploration with this massive, very public confession.
A really vulnerable one, too.
He admits that he built a significant portion of his early platform by creating what he calls rant.
Oh, the rant reviews. The internet loves a good rant review.
They do. And these were sprawling 30 to 40-minute video essays where he was just systematically tearing apart popular young adult novels.
Just shredding them.
Yeah. He was directing this immense, almost venomous critique at massive cultural juggernauts. We're talking Divergent, Throne of Glass, Shadow and Bone, Twilight.
Books that literally defined a generation of readers.
Exact. And he was dedicating hours of his life investing serious production value and emotional energy producing these public takedowns.
Of books that were specifically written by women for young teenage girls.
Right, which is the key detail.
Right. And for years, he was totally blind to the sheer irony of that dynamic. He really believed he was operating as his objective literary critic, like he was upholding the sacred standards of the written word.
He thought he was doing the literary world a favor, honest, pointing out that these books were poorly.
But then the turning point happened, and it actually came from his own audience, didn't it?
It did. There were two specific commenters on his channel users named Udi Karma and Dragoneye.
Shout out to Udi Karma and Dragoneye for the reality check.
Seriously. They essentially staged this comment section intervention. They completely bypassed all his complex literary arguments and just laid out a much simpler truth.
Which was?
They pointed out his demographic reality as a grown man and stated plainly that these books were simply not meant for him.
Wow. I mean, it sounds so obvious when you say it out loud.
It is a deceptively simple observation, but it forced this complete paradigm shift in how he viewed media consumption.
Because it forced him to audit himself, right?
Yeah.
It shattered his worldview.
Exactly.
When he went back and audited his own rant reviews across totally different authors and different fantasy worlds, he realized his complaints were all identical.
Right across the board.
Yeah, like he hated the romance subplot, he despised the love triangles, he harbored this deep annoyance for the brooding male love interests, Jacob and Edward in Twilight, Malin the Darkling and Shadow and Bone.
Which is like half the appeal of those books for the target audience.
Exactly. And he fundamentally disliked the female protagonists too, like Alina Starkov and Billa Swan.
So what that actually means is that he was critiquing the books for successfully delivering the exact emotional experiences they were aired.
Yes. The books were doing their job.
Right, because the intended audience of teenage girls ages 12 to 18, they were actively seeking out those specific tropes.
They want the love triangle.
The love triangle isn't a structural flaw in a YA romance. It is the core engine of the narrative.
Yeah, that's what's driving the whole plot forward.
Exactly. And the blank slate female protagonist, that isn't a failure of character development. She's an intentional design choice.
So the reader can project themselves onto her.
Precise. It allows the reader to seamlessly project themselves right in. And what's fascinating here is how often we conflate our personal distaste for a genre's conventions with an actual failure of the author.
Right. It's back to the steakhouse analogy. Imagine someone walking into a high-end, highly rated steakhouse, sitting down and ordering the one single sushi roll they have on the appetizer menu.
Oh, that's a terrible idea.
Right. They eat it, they find it mediocre, and then they go home and write this furious one-star Yelp review condemning the entire restaurant.
This steakhouse is garbage because the tuna is dry.
Exactly. You cannot judge a steakhouse on its sushi, and you cannot judge a teenage romance novel for focusing heavily on the melodrama of teenage romance.
No, you really can't. And Sammy, the creator, actually provides this brilliant self-reflection on his past hatred of Twilight to illustrate this exact...
Oh, the Edward perspective thing.
Yes, he had spent years arguing that Twilight was fundamentally flawed from a narrative perspective because it should have been told from the vampire Edward.
Because he's a grown man who wants to read about brooding vampires, not teenage girls.
Right. He thought the book would be infinitely more compelling if we were inside the mind of this immortal creature struggling with his monstrous nature rather than, the mundane teenage girl worrying about prom.
And what was his epiphany there?
Well, the epiphany is profound. He realizes that if the story had been told from Edward's perspective, focusing on the dark, brooding mechanics of vampire politics and eternal isolation,
then it wouldn't be Twilight anymore.
Exactly. It would have been a book tailored to his specific demographics. It would have been a book intended.
Wow. So by demanding the narrative shift to accommodate his preferences, he was basically demanding the author abandon her actual audience.
Yes. The very thing he perceived as a structural flaw, which was the heavy focus on Bella's teenage emotional landscape, was actually just a boundary. Yeah. It was a sign keeping him out.
Saying, hey, this isn't for you.
Exactly.
He recognized that boundary line, which is great.
Yeah.
But what I find really compelling is that he doesn't just throw out all his past criticism. He doesn't suddenly claim these books are flawless masterpieces.
Right. He doesn't swing the pendulum entirely in the other direction.
No, he draws a very specific line in the sand between objective craft critique and subjective audience bias.
Which is a very hard line to walk.
It is. He brings up his old, highly critical review of Sarah J. Maas's Throne of Glass, and he concedes entirely that his hatred of the romance subplots in that book was pure audience bias.
He was just bored by the kissing.
Yeah, he was bored by the kissing, and he owns that as his own subjective issue. But he still fiercely stands by his critique of how the book portrayed PTSD.
Because that distinction is really the bedrock of media literacy.
Oh.
He points out that trauma, psychological character continuity, these are fundamental elements of storytelling. They transcend demographic boundaries.
Right. A poorly written trauma response is poorly written, whether it's in YA or literary fiction.
Exact. If a narrative establishes that a character has endured horrific, mind-shattering trauma, the subsequent portrayal of that trauma must carry a certain psychological weight. So when he criticizes the shallow exploration of PTSD in Throne of Glass, he is evaluating the technical execution of a complex theme.
That's a valid, objective craft criticism.
But when he complains about the romance, he's just complaining about the neon rhinestones on the blender again.
I love that. So let me ask you, and you listening out there, a question. If I know deep down in my bones that I absolutely hate romance novels, that I find them tedious and predictable,
Mhm.
is it fundamentally unfair for me to pick one up, read it, and publish a review tearing it down?
Like, are you just polluting the discourse?
Yeah. Is it fair for me to review a romance novel if I'm not the demographic?
Well, I think it depends entirely on the framing of your critique. If a reviewer states their bias up front and analyzes how the book functions within its own intended ecosystem, that can still be really valuable.
So a critic who dislikes romance could still identify, like clunky prose or inconsistent world building.
Exact. Terrible pacing is terrible. However, if your critique is entirely rooted in a fundamental distaste for the genre's foundational element, if your entire review is just expressing anger that a romance novel focuses heavily on romance, then your review serves absolutely no critical purpose.
You're just screaming into the void that you don't like a thing that wasn't built for you.
Precise.
Well, this is a great pivot, because if readers and reviewers have a difficult time navigating this boundary, understanding the fundamental purpose of a book, it gets exponentially more damaging when internet influencers attempt to actually write and publish them.
Oh boy. Yes, it does.
Yeah, the creator's transcripts take a very sharp, very aggressive turn here. He shifts his focus completely away from traditional authors and zeroes in on what he explicitly labels YouTuber books.
And he does not pull punches here.
Not at all. So these are novels written by massive internet personalities, right? Creators who have already built audiences in the millions across platforms like YouTube, Instagram, or TikTok.
Right. And his assessment of these books is utterly brutal. He does not mince. He refers to the entire category as an abomination.
An abomination.
Yeah.
That is strong wording.
It is. But his argument against them is deeply rooted in the economic mechanisms of the modern creator economy.
Okay, break that down for me. What is the core issue?
He argues that when an influencer with millions of subscribers writes a book, they are inherently viewing that novel as just another piece of merch.
Like a t-shirt.
Exactly. To them, a 300-page fantasy epic is conceptually no different than a branded t-shirt, a coffee mug with their catchphrase on it, or, a sponsored makeup palette.
It's just another product to push down the content pipeline.
Right. It's just a way to monetize their existing audience. And this creates a fundamental clash between the economic mindset and the artistic mindset.
How does that differ from traditional publishing? Because publishers want to make money, too.
Of course. But in traditional publishing, an unknown author is financially incentivized to make the book as undeniably brilliant as possible.
Because it has to stand on its own.
Exactly. The book has to sell itself on its own merit to an audience of total strangers. The quality of the prose, the depth of the characters, the originality of the plot, these are the only tools the traditional author has to generate sales.
They don't have 3 million subscribers ready to buy it day one.
Right. But when an influencer possesses a massive, highly devoted, pre-existing audience, that economic share completely evaporates.
The financial risk just drops to zero.
It drops to zero. They know that if they publish a book, a certain guaranteed percentage of their followers will purchase it simply out of loyalty.
Or parasocial obligation.
Regardless of the actual quality of the writing. And when the financial risk drops to zero, the drive to meticulously craft a master often vanishes.
Because writing a great book is really, really hard.
It's agonizing. It requires relentless revision, painful developmental editing, and a willingness to just tear down your own work and rebuild it from scratch.
But if you know it's going to hit the bestseller list purely based on pre-orders from your subscribers,
then the incentive to endure that agonizing artistic process is totally removed. In fact, the economic incentive is actually to cut corners, produce the book as quickly as possible, and move on to the next merch.
Wow. And the source actually provides a very specific, stinging example of this phenomenon in action, doesn't he?
He does. He brings up a YA sci-fi novel called Zenith.
The Zenith.
Yes, it was co-authored by Sasha Alsberg, who runs a massive BookTube channel called BookTopia, and Lindsay Cummings.
And what did our source think of Zenith?
He describes reading Zenith as an abhorrent experience. He literally says he could not get past the first 20 pages.
Ouch. 20 pages in, and he just bailed.
He put it down and completely abandoned. He argues forcefully that the only reason a book with such glaring structural and prose deficiencies ever reached the bestseller list was the sheer overwhelming size of the auth platform.
There was just nothing redeeming about the story itself in his eye.
Nothing. And from there, the transcript transitions into this deeply philosophical exploration of what actually separates real art from this merchandise mind.
What's his definition of art in this context?
He argues that true art requires a profound injection. It demands the exploration of difficult themes, the vulnerable expression of personal struggles, and immense, often invisible effort.
So it's not just a widget.
Right. He states that a book must be treated as a chapter of the author. It has to contain some piece of it to not simply be a mass-produced product designed to satisfy a content algorithm or extract cappies from a fan.
And I appreciate that he backs up this philosophical argument by contrasting Zenith with books he actually finished, even though he found them highly problematic.
Yeah, that's an important...
It really proves he isn't just being a contrarian who quits reading at the first sign of trouble, right? Like, he brings up a book called Storm Dance.
Right, which he had heavy critiques.
Yeah, he levied a very heavy critique against it, calling it a cultural appropriation myth. But he actually finished reading the entire novel.
And why did he finish it?
Because the core dynamic between the two main characters, Yukiko and Baru, felt genuine. There was a spark of actual humanity and emotional resonance there that made the narrative redeemable.
He saw the F.
Exactly. And he brings up Shadow and Bone again, too. He heavily disliked the protagonist, but he readily admits that the author's world building was magnificent, the prose was elegant, and the editing was undeniably professional.
Whereas Zenith, in his opinion, lacked any of those qualities.
Right, because it lacked the foundational effort required to elevate a product into art.
To crystallize this difference, he makes this fascinating historical comparison to George Lucas and the original Star Wars 1970s.
Okay, I love a good Star Wars analogy. How does this fit in?
Well, setting aside any contemporary opinions on the franchise as it is now, the creator points out the immense personal risk George Lucas absorbed to create his first film.
He risked everything.
He did. Lucas was operating as a true artist, attempting to express his own deep mythological themes and personal struggles on screen. He risked his health, his finances, his entire career.
He poured his absolute humanity into it.
Exactly. And that visceral, agonizing effort translates directly to the audience. The transcript contrasts that level of artistic commitment with the modern influencer product pipeline, where the art itself is entirely secondary to the branding strategy.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though. Let me push back on this a little bit.
Please do.
This narrative of the pure starving artist versus the cynical modern influencer, hasn't the publishing industry always been at its core a ruthless business?
I mean, yes.
We talk about this merchandise mindset like it's a brand new disease brought on by the internet, but publishers have been pumping out low-effort celebrity memoirs, ghost-written political thrillers, and like cheap movie tie-in novels for decades.
That's true.
Why is a YouTuber leveraging their millions of subscribers to sell a sci-fi book fundamentally any different from a reality TV star getting a lucrative book deal in 1998? Isn't it all just a historical commodification of an audience? Why the unique outrage for booktubers?
It's a very fair point, and from a purely macroeconomic perspective, you are absolutely correct. Traditional publishing has always relied on built-in audiences to hedge their financial bets. A celebrity memoir is a safe investment. However, the transcript suggests that the sense of betrayal feels significantly more acute in the BookTube space because of the specific nature of the parasocial relationships these creators...
Okay, let's break that down mechanically for a second. What exactly is a parasocial relationship in this context, and why does it change the expectation?
So a parasocial relationship is a one-sided psychological bond where an audience member feels a deep personal connection to a media figure.
A real friend.
Exactly. While the media figure doesn't even know the audience member exists. And influencers cultivate these relationships deliberately by speaking directly to the camera, sharing intimate details of their lives, and fostering this intense sense of community.
It's very intimate.
It is. Now, when a reality TV star releases a ghostwritten book, there is no real artistic betrayal because the reality star never claimed to be a literary genius.
Right. Their brand is built on drama or lifestyle, not high art. If Snooki releases a book, I know what I'm getting.
Exactly. But a booktuber's entire brand, their entire digital identity, is built on an obsessive love for literature.
Oh.
They present themselves as curators of quality. They spend hours analyzing prose, dissecting character arcs, and supposedly understanding the deep, complex mechanics of what makes great.
Ah, I see it now. So when a creator whose entire platform is built on being a rigorous literary critic turns around and hands their audience a shallow, mass-produced, poorly written product,
It's a betrayal.
it isn't just a bad business transaction. It feels like a fundamental violation of the core values they preach on their channel every single day.
Exactly. It's the hypocrisy that generates the outrage. The audience feels manipulated because the influencer weaponized their shared love of literature to sell a substandard product.
That makes total sense.
And this specific dynamic perfectly illuminates the darkest, most complicated rabbit hole in this entire... Because if a book reviewer writing a bad book is an abomination...
What happens when the influencer's entire brand is built on being an authoritative writing expert?
Exact. This brings us to the AuthorTuber paradox.
The AuthorTuber community. So these are creators on YouTube whose primary output isn't reviewing books, but giving highly specific advice on the actual craft of writing them.
Right. They produce endless videos dictating how to format dialogue correctly, how to build compelling character arcs, how to successfully query literary agents, and how to structure a 3-act plot.
They're teaching the craft. And according to the devastating assessment of our source, 99% of these AuthorTubers release absolutely terrible books.
It's a brutal statistic, but he backs it up.
He does. The source provides 2 incredibly detailed case studies that illustrate this paradox perfectly.
Let's get into those.
So, case study number 1 centers on a prominent AuthorTuber named Jenna Moretti. The creator details how, back in 2016, he was actually an avid consumer of her writing advice videos.
He was a fan.
He was. He found her content mesmerized. She spoke with total, unshakable confidence. She projected this absolute authority of someone who had completely mastered the hidden mechanics of storytelling.
He actually notes that she delivered her advice with the gravitas of Shakespeare.
The gravitas of Shakespeare.
Yeah. And this raises an important question about the psychological effect of that confidence. It's incredibly powerful. When someone speaks with absolute certainty about a complex subject, we naturally assume they possess the underlying competence to back it up.
Right. If you sound like an expert, people believe you are one.
Exactly. So naturally, driven by his respect for her apparent expertise, he decides to purchase and read her published novel, E, The Awakening.
And he goes into this reading experience with sky-high expectations, right? He's expecting a masterclass in modern prose, but instead, he describes the experience of reading the book as a total shock. He uses the phrases weird hypnosis and psychological disconnect to describe his state of mind while reading it.
He was just completely baffled.
Yeah, he's staring at the pages, realizing the prose is remarkably bad, the pacing is off, the execution is amateurish, and his brain is desperately trying to reconcile the terrible writing in his hands with the absolute unshakable confidence of the person giving him writing advice on screen.
He realized in real time that she simply did not practice.
It's just wild.
And this scenario exposes a massive ethical question regarding the monetization of experts in the digital age.
The ethics of it, yeah.
Because it's one thing to write a bad book. Writing a novel is incredible, and most first attempts are flawed.
Everyone writes bad first drafts.
Exactly. There is no moral failing in producing bad art. The ethical dilemma arises when you deliberately present yourself as a definitive authority, when you build a massive platform dictating to others how to do it correct while fundamentally lacking mastery of the craft yourself.
Taking people's trust. And the ethical implications become significantly more severe with his second case study. Yeah. He brings up a creator named Meg Latour, who ran a highly successful channel called iWriterly.
iWriterly.
And she didn't just offer general high-level writing advice. She specifically branded herself as a publishing industry insider. She heavily leveraged her past experience working at a literary agency to position herself as a definitive expert on traditional publishing.
Which carries a lot of weight for aspiring authors.
Huge weight. And here's the absolute kick. She sold paid courses. She was actively taking money from aspiring authors to teach them how to write query letters to secure traditional publishing.
Okay, to understand why this is so controversial, we really need to understand the mechanics of querying.
Yes, explain how brutal this process.
Querying a literary agent is notoriously one of the most difficult, soul-crushing processes in the artistic world. An aspiring author must distill their 80,000-word manuscript into a single, flawless, one-page letter.
Just one page to sell the whole thing?
One page. And agents receive thousands of these queries a month, and they reject 99% of it, often based on a single weak sentence paragraph.
It's real.
It is. So selling a course, promising to teach writers how to navigate this brutal gauntlet, implies a very high level of specialized, proven expertise.
So she is selling these high-priced courses, presenting herself as the ultimate gatekeeper of traditional publishing knowledge. And then she bypassed the traditional publishing route entirely.
She self-published.
She opted to self-publish her own sci-fi fantasy novel called The Cyborg Tinkerer.
Right. And the source creator, Sammy, purchased the book to evaluate her execution.
And how did that go?
He claims he couldn't even make it past the first chapter. In fact, he argues that the very first sentence of the novel fails fundamentally on a structural level.
Just the first sentence.
Just the first sentence. He is analyzing this opening chapter and experiencing this profound sense of cognitive dissonance again. He realizes that if an unknown author submitted this exact opening chapter to a traditional literary agent, it would be unceremoniously rejected from the slush pile immediately.
But the person who wrote it is charging aspiring writers money to teach them how to impress those exact same agents.
Exactly.
Let's actually analyze the nature of the writing advice these channels provide, though, because the transcript hits on a critical insight regarding how internet expertise is manufactured.
This is a great point.
The source notes that the advice given by many of these AuthorTubers is often what he derisively calls baby advice.
Baby advice. I love that term.
Yeah. By baby advice, he means surface level, easily digestible information that anyone could acquire with a 5-minute Google search.
Right. It masquerades as deep insight, but lacks any practical utility.
For example, a common video topic might be telling aspiring writers that their dialogue needs to contain subtext.
Right. They'll look dead into the camera and say, guys, the secret to great dialogue is using subtext. Your characters shouldn't just say what they mean. Make sure you add...
Which sounds incredibly professional. It sounds like high-level literary theory.
It does, but the critical failure is that they never actually demonstrate how to execute it mechanically.
They don't show the work.
Exactly. They don't pull up a poorly written scene and meticulously rewrite it on screen to show the listener what subtext actually looks like in practice, because teaching the mechanics of subtext is critical.
Well, let's actually do what they don't do. Let's explain the mechanics of subtext right now.
Let's do it.
If a writer doesn't understand subtext, they might write a scene where a husband and wife are arguing and the dialogue is entirely on the nose. The husband yells, "I am angry because you work too much and never pay attention to me."
Very literal.
And the wife yells back, "I work too much because we have massive credit card debt that you caused."
Yep.
It is technically conveying information, but it is entirely wooden and unnatural. Nobody talks like that in real life.
Exactly. To rewrite that scene with actual subtext, the characters need to argue about something entirely unrelated on the surface, while the underlying emotional truth...
Give me an example.
They could be standing in the kitchen, furiously arguing over how to properly load the dishwasher.
Oh, classic argument.
Right. The husband aggressively shoves a plate into the bottom rack and says, "You always just throw things in wherever they fit. You never think about the long..."
Oh, that's good.
And the wife responds, quietly closing the door, "Some of us don't have the luxury of perfectly organizing everything. Some of us just have a machine running."
Oh, wow. Yeah. On the surface, they are talking about dishes. Yep. But in the subtext, they are talking about his resentment of her chaotic work schedule and her resentment of his financial irresponsibility.
Exactly. Teaching a writer how to construct that layered interaction takes immense skill, deep psychological understanding, and years of practice.
It's so much easier for an AuthorTuber to just make a 10-minute video defining the word subtext, monetize the views, and move on.
Right. They tell their audience what to do, but because they haven't endured the agonizing process of mastering it themselves, they are entirely incapable of teaching the audience how to act.
And eventually the audience realizes they're being sold a hollow product. Which brings us back to the drama surrounding Meg Latour's The Cyborg Tinkerer.
This drama, huge.
It perfectly illustrates this break. The book launched to a dismal reception, holding a 3.33 average rating on Goodreads.
Which, in the heavily inflated ecosystem of books, disaster.
Yeah. That's right. But the backlash wasn't just about the prose being weak. A prominent, highly frustrated review from a reader went viral.
And what did the review?
The reviewer completely tore the author apart, explicitly pointing out the exact hypocrisy we are discussing. The reviewer felt utterly betrayed, stating it was fundamentally unethical to aggressively sell expensive courses on how to get traditionally published while simultaneously self-publishing a book riddled with amateur mistakes.
People were furious, and this public backlash set the stage for an incredibly bizarre escalation.
The bots.
Yes. In late February of 2021, the Goodreads page for The Cyborg Tinkerer experienced a massive, highly anomalous event. A massive influx of 5-star reviews flooded the book's page.
All on the same day, right?
All on the exact same day. Furthermore, many of the accounts leaving these glowing reviews looked incredibly suspicious, lacking profile pictures, having no other reading history, and using generic language.
This immediately triggered widespread allegations across the BookTube community that the author had panicked over the bad press and purchased a bot farm to artificially inflate her rating.
It became the ultimate internet. It had everything: hypocrisy, a failed launch, and now alleged technological fraud.
But the source creator's reaction to this specific controversy completely subverted my expectations.
Same here.
Because Meg Latour eventually issued a public statement vehemently denying that she bought fake reviews. She stated that to protect her own mental health, she strictly avoids looking at Goodreads altogether.
Which is pretty common for authors.
Yeah. She suggested that the sudden influx of reviews might have been organic, perhaps participants of a specific Steamathon reading event she was involved in, or maybe overzealous, misguided fans trying to combat the negative reviews on her behalf. She publicly begged them to stop, insisting she only wanted honest feedback.
And how did our deeply critical source evaluate her defense?
He actually believes her.
Which is wild.
I know. Despite spending the entire transcript tearing apart the quality of AuthorTuber books and criticizing her business model, he says point blank that he does not believe she bought the book.
And his reasoning isn't based on defending her character, is it?
No. It is based entirely on cold, hard logic. He points out that purchasing a massive payload of fake 5-star reviews and dropping them all onto the platform on a single day would be strategically idiotic.
It's so obvious.
Right. Anyone who fundamentally understands how internet algorithms and online mobs operate knows that a spike like that will trigger immediate suspicion. It's too obvious. If you were going to buy reviews, you would drip feed them slowly over months to simulate organic growth.
That is a remarkably sharp and objective piece of analysis from the creator. It really demonstrates a high level of critical thinking.
It does.
He is successfully separating his intense distaste for her book and her business practices from the rampant internet mob mentality. He refuses to paint her as this cartoon villain orchestrating a sinister bot farm. He simply maintains his original grounded critique. She wrote a bad book while claiming to be an expert.
The internet loves a conspiracy, but the truth is usually just incompetence or poor judgment.
Exactly.
He uses an analogy to describe the feeling of reading these AuthorTuber books that really stuck with me.
Oh, the religious.
Yes. Imagine if a prominent religious leader preached a sacred text, gave you a strict, rigorous set of rules for how to live a moral life, and then you immediately watched them walk out the door and flagrantly break every single rule they just preached.
It shatters the illusion.
The trust is instantaneously destroyed, and it forces us to look at the broader landscape of the internet. Like, how much of the advice industry in any field, whether it's writing, business entrepreneurship, fitness, or life coaching, is just regurgitated.
Yeah.
Safe material being aggressively peddled by people who haven't actually done the grueling, unglamorous work themselves.
It is a pervasive, systemic issue. It's deeply embedded in the architecture of the digital economy.
How so?
Because the algorithms that govern social media platforms reward the aggressive appearance of expertise significantly faster and much more lucratively than they reward the actual quiet accumulation of true expertise.
Looking like an expert pays better than being one.
Exactly. Creating the illusion of mastery is highly profitable. Achieving actual mastery is slow, painful, and often ignores the algorithm entirely.
Wow.
But the transcript takes this analysis a crucial step further. The creator argues that the reason these massive YouTubers fail when they try to write books isn't necessarily because they lack inherent creative talent.
They aren't doomed from birth to be bad writers.
Precisely. The problem is entirely structural. Their failure is a direct, unavoidable byproduct of their internet.
Because of the pressure.
Yeah. By prioritizing the rapid building of an audience before they have mastered their craft, they have inadvertently robbed themselves of the single most crucial ingredient required for our growth.
And what is that?
They have lost the advantage of...
The advantage of silence. This is the absolute core insight of this entire deep dive.
It really is.
The transcript argues that the absolute greatest gift a young writer or any aspiring artist in any medium can be given is to not be paid attention.
Which sounds completely counterintuitive to everything we are taught today.
Right. Modern culture relentlessly demands that we build our personal brand, get our name out there immediately, document our journey, and hustle for followers from day one.
But internet fame creates this highly pressurized, completely distorted feedback.
Walk me through that.
Imagine a prominent AuthorTuber who has just finished writing the very first rough draft of a single chapter. Because they have hundreds of thousands of fans and they exist within an echo chamber of other influencer friends, the immediate, overwhelming reaction from their environment is premature validation and intense pressure.
Publish it. We want to read it.
Exactly. When is the book coming out? The demand for content overrides the necessity for craft.
So they publish it far before it is actually ready.
Right. They haven't afforded themselves the critical time to let the manuscript breathe. They haven't had the quiet space to step back, tear the story apart, realize the pacing is fundamentally flawed, and rewrite it from scratch.
They just push the rough draft out the door to feed the insatiable content.
And then the inevitable. The book is released to a broader audience outside their loyal fan. It gets ruthlessly mocked for its amateur flaws. Their channel's reputation as an authority is severely damaged.
And their entire brand takes a massive, sometimes unrecoverable hit.
Exactly. Now, to illustrate the profound power of working in silence, the source provides a magnificent counterexample.
Yes, the Brandon Sanderson methodology. It is the ultimate antidote to the AuthorTuber paradox.
It really is. Before Sanderson became the absolute juggernaut of modern fantasy publishing, setting records for Kickstarter campaigns and dominating bestseller lists, he wrote in complete profound obscurity.
Utter silence.
Yes. He wrote his first full-length novel, Nothing Happened. He wrote his second, third, fourth, and fifth novel. Complete silence.
That is so much writing.
It is. And then he wrote his sixth book, which was Elantris. He submitted it to the traditional publishing gatekeepers, and they told him it simply wasn't good enough for publication.
And crucially, because this was before the era of BookTube, he didn't have a massive YouTube audience to complain to.
No safety net.
He couldn't just pivot, throw Elantris up on Amazon, self-publish it to a rabid fan base for a quick buck, and convince himself he was a master of the craft.
Exactly. The lack of an audience forced him to confront the reality of his skill level.
So what did he do?
He didn't start a channel teaching people how to write. He wrote 6 more massive fantasy novels.
6 more, so that's 12 total.
Yes. Mechanically, writing 12 full novels in obscurity fundamentally rewires a writer's brain. With each unpublished book, he was forced to experiment with complex world building, iterate on pacing structures, and refine his prose without the distorting influence of external value.
It was only after completing 12 full novels that the publishing industry finally looked at his work and realized he had actually reached a professional publishable level several books prior.
And the source creator points out a beautiful irony here.
What's that?
What felt like an absolute agonizing curse to Sanderson at the time being ignored, facing relentless rejection, working for years with zero value, was actually his greatest asset.
He was given the immense luxury of time to fail.
Yes. He had the necessary space to experiment with massive magical systems, to write terrible dialogue and fix it privately, slowly, and master his craft without thousands of people watch every move and demanding daily up.
The synthesis of this lesson reveals the grueling, unglamorous reality of true artistic endeavor. The creator explains that when you truly dedicate yourself to writing, you realize that after you think a book is finally done, after you've poured months into a draft, you must develop the psychological resilience to start over entirely, as if you have never worked on it.
True writing is rewriting.
It requires a ruthless, slow, and frequently demoralizing editing process where you murder your own darling.
An influencer culture, which operates on a frantic cycle of constant, rapid-fire content creation to appease an algorithm, is fundamentally structurally incompatible with that level of rigorous, low art.
And the brilliance of bringing up Sanderson is that it completely closes the loop on the AuthorTuber problem, because Brandon Sanderson actually does give writing advice now.
He does. He's very famous.
Right. He famously teaches a wildly popular university course on writing fantasy, and those lectures are available online. But when Sanderson gives advice, he isn't just staring at a webcam giving generic baby advice about subtext.
No, he has the receipts.
He has the receipt. When he discusses how to build a hard magic system or how to execute a satisfying plot avalanche in the 3rd act, he can point to highly specific, concrete examples of how he flawlessly executed those exact techniques across thousands of pages of his own published, critically acclaimed epics.
He earned the right to teach through silent suffering.
And this realization forces a deeply vulnerable moment of self-reflection from our source creator, doesn't it?
It does. After dissecting the failures of the AuthorTubers, he turns the lens entirely on...
Which is brave, honestly.
Very. He admits that watching these influencers fail and understanding the necessity of silence triggered a profound epiphany about his own place in the online writing D.
He's brutally honest about it. He literally says, I realize I'm a terrible writer.
Yeah. He recognized that he had not put in the silent years of practice required to master the craft.
And instead of doubling down, instead of letting his ego drive him to self-publish a bad book to his massive audience, he chose integrity.
He went back through his channel and systematically deleted his old writing advice videos.
He completely pivoted his entire brand away from AuthorTube and firmly back into BookTube. He decided he would only review books as a reader, rather than pretending he possessed the authority to tell people how to write.
He did make one highly specific, very deliberate exception to this new...
Right, the character arc.
Yes. He decided he would only give writing advice on the single, solitary element of storytelling that he actually understands on a deep, mechanical level and has practiced relentless character arc.
By aggressively narrowing his focus to his actual area of proven competence and abandoning the illusion of total mastery, he successfully regained his intellectual integrity.
Exactly.
Which leaves me wondering about the reality for anyone trying to build a career today. Is it even structurally possible to develop a new skill in public anymore?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Or does the modern algorithmic landscape demand that we present ourselves as fully formed, flawless experts on day one, trapping us in a never-ending, highly stressful cycle of faking it until we hopefully eventually make it? Because it feels like the internet simply does not allow you the grace to be a beginner.
It is a deeply daunting reality for modern. The immense economic pressure to monetize a hobby immediately upon starting it, to turn your first painting into an Etsy store, your first rough draft into a Patreon, your first workout into a fitness coaching channel. It forces people to skip the essential foundational phase of quiet, unobserved mediocrity.
You cannot skip the mediocrity phase if you want to achieve true mastery.
No, you can't. The pressure to perform competence destroys the ability to build competence.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today, navigating the chaotic transcripts of Samian books.
It's been a journey.
It really has. We started with the jarring realization that not every piece of art is engineered for our specific demographic, that sometimes the rhinestone blender is exactly what someone else needs to make their life vibrant, and our angry review is just self-centered noise. We explored the dangerous trap of treating art as mere merchandise, where influencers pump out soulless, unedited books just to extract capital from their loyal audience. We unpack the deep hypocrisy of the author-tuber paradox, where creators sell expensive expertise they haven't earned.
A fake it till you make it trap.
And finally, we discovered the profound, almost sacred necessity of the advantage of silence when attempting to master any craft. So, what does this all mean for you?
If you internalize one core lesson from this deep dive, let it be the absolute necessity of rigorous critical thinking in an era defined by information overload and algorithmic.
Question everything.
Exactly. We are constantly, relentlessly bombarded by voices claiming absolute You must evaluate not just the art or the advice you consume, but the credentials, the historical track record, and the quiet, unseen labor of the people who are attempting to dictate how you consume or create.
Look at the receipt.
Look at the receipts. Do they have them, like Brandon Sanderson, forged in years of silent effort? Or are they hiding their lack of mastery behind a polished YouTube persona while delivering easily digested baby advice?
And that leads me to a final lingering question for you to mull over as you navigate the digital world. We have established that the advantage of silence might just be the critical secret ingredient required to create a true master. But look at the architecture of the culture we live in, right? What does our modern, always online, hyper-monetized ecosystem mean for the future of all art form?
Oh, that's a chilling thought.
In a world where every single hobby, every flawed rough draft, every half-baked melody is immediately monetized and broadcast on TikTok or YouTube for instant validation, are we systematically, culturally sacrificing the next generation of masterpieces just to generate enough content to feed the daily algorithm today?
A sobering, essential thought to end our analysis on.
Something to think about the next time you feel that overwhelming pressure to post your unfinished progress online. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. Keep questioning what you read, keep fiercely questioning the authority of what you watch, and remember, before you confidently leave a 1-star review, just double check to make sure you aren't complaining about the quality of the sushi at a high-end steakhouse. Take care, everyone.